Welcome back to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. Don Jeffries is joining me again. Talk about the RFK assassination. Now, you did work on the RFK assassination. You're interested in the RFK assassination. Was that because of the JFK stuff? It just kind of comes with the territory.
Sure. As a matter of fact, I probably was interested in that first because when I've described my political awakening as a teenager, but I was a typical liberal Democrat, a very radical left-wing Democrat, card-carrying member of the ACLU. I mean, I was as left as you could get, and I loved the Kennedys. And as a little kid, when Bobby Kennedy ran for president, that's when I discovered politics and the primaries and the delegates and all that stuff. And I was just crushed. I cried like a baby when he was killed. A little really remember JFK much, but so he was my hero. And I remember watching he had a show called Tomorrow with Tom Snyder back in the day. It used to come on late back when channels weren't on all night. So NBC had it on after the Tonight Show at 1 a.m. So I was always up late, so I watch it. And Snyder had some assassination stuff on because this was like 1975, and the interest was being kindled, especially in the JFK assassination. But he had a guy named Allard Lowenstein on his show once, who was a congressman who was spearheading the effort to reopen the RFK assassination. So I was fascinated by it. So that was my first exposure really to assassination conspiracy stuff. I was amazed. And so it actually became before I started looking into JFK assassination. Then, of course, when I started that, there's no stopping me. But and Howard Lowenstein, of course, ironically, was later assassinated himself in his congressional office by supposed. I mean, how many congressmen get assassinated in their office? Very many. Howard Lowenstein did, and he happened to be the only one in Congress looking into the RFK assassination. So that's kind of the way those things go. But so there aren't as many books out there about the RFK assassination. So when I started in the assassination, it was just tons about JFK, and there really wasn't much, especially back then. That RFK Must Die by Robert Blair Kaiser, which was pretty much accepted that Sirhan did it, but it had a lot of good background stuff, and that's where I first learned about Sirhan's diary and obvious allusions to being hypnotized or MK Ultra or something. And he's writing about the Illuminati in his diary. He's writing over and over again, pay to the order of Sirhan, Sirhan, pay to the order of Sirhan, Sirhan. He's talking about Albert DeSalvo, the Boston Strangler. Lots of interesting stuff in that diary. And Sirhan had a lot of curious connections as well, but really was probably had to order through the mail back in the days before internet. You had to get really extremist literature through the mail. So, and I had all the connections. So there was a thing called the RFK assassination scrapbook, Jack Kimbrough and Lillian Castellano, and that was one of the best things. But it was like loose leaf. It's not even so it wasn't even self-published back in those days. So I had that somewhere. It's probably worth a lot of money now, but a lot of good stuff there, and that's where I learned about the ballistics, how it didn't add up. And there were magic bullets in the pantry, just like there, was the magic bullet in Dealey Plaza, and that there are lots and lots of questions there. A little bit different. The RFK is different than JFK because no one questions Sirhan had a gun and was shooting because he's
Because he
documented.
lived.
Yeah, well, yeah, he lived, and he was, he's documented as Rosie Greer and all these people trying to get the gun out of his hand on the pantry table. So there's no question about that. But it's just, was there a second gunman? I think it's pretty obvious there was because the ballistics don't add up. Thomas Noguchi almost lost his job as coroner to the stars out there because he kept stood firm with saying no. The fatal bullet entered point blank range. There were powder burns behind his right ear, and no witness placed Sirhan behind RFK at any time, let alone that close. So I think that alone, the autopsy, certainly, and my good friend John Barber, who you ought to talk to sometime if you haven't. He,
I'm friends with him on Facebook.
oh yeah, well you said he'll be happy to talk to you. He's a great interview. Just the showbiz, the combination of showbiz and assassinations is great. But he's a legend. He was Frank Sinatra's speechwriter, writer for several years, uh, host of Real People, which is the number one show on television for 3 years back in 1981. So he lost his friendship with Sinatra over Noguchi because he was one of the celebrities back then that was involved in they were trying to fire Noguchi. And it was all because of that he was telling that, he's saying, no, the bullet hadn't entered behind. So that's, uh, that's the basis for it. There's lots of other elements we can talk about. The girl in the polka dot dress and all these other things that are kind of intriguing. But it's a little different because Sirhan was there, and his excuse is, I mean, he hasn't been the greatest witness either over the years because he'll say kind of strange things sometimes. And but basically, he's stuck basically to his story from the very beginning that he doesn't remember anything. And the last thing he remembers is a girl handing him coffee. And that girl was probably the girl in the polka dot dress who most of us think was his handler.
Who the one that ran out said we got Kennedy.
Well, there's somebody said they saw, yes, a woman, the girl in the polka dot dress was seen by several witnesses. And as I, in my book, Hidden History, I have a long section on the RFK assassination. And uh, I talk about all the sightings of this girl in the polka dot dress leading up to the assassination. I mean, she was following Kennedy's campaign, and she was seen with Sirhan and another guy several times. You can find a lot of that was I think I got from William Turner and Hinkle's book, which was the first one really to come out and do a really good job on the RFK assassination back in the.
I didn't know she was following the campaign. I just thought it was she was there, but she it is kind of weird. I mean, wearing a polka dot dress. I think she was the only one there that was wearing a polka dot dress, so obviously it wasn't the style.
No, it was to stand out, and you had tons of credible witnesses who all described her the same way. You know, I mean, she caught their attention because she had a great build. You know, they all described that, and but she also had what they call a funny nose or a weird nose. This is clearly the same person that they were seeing, and they obviously could never find her because they didn't try to find her. And if you want to look at some classic, police questioning of a witness, Sandy Serrano, who was a teenager at the time. She was the one that was sitting outside. It was too hot for her. And she saw them running out and saying they would kill them, including the girl in the polka dot dress. And when she told the authorities that, and another police officer, I think it was Sergeant Paul Shiraga, said the same thing. That it was, said that an old couple called the Goldsteins or something. He didn't really get their name. He just said, I think it was that the Goldsteins. That's what he said. He didn't bother to get their names exactly. He said the polka dress saying we shot him as well. I think there were others too. But so Serrano was later questioned by I think it was Manny Pena of the Manny Pena of the LAPD, and the recordings are out there. It's shocking to listen to because this is not a police officer that was out for the truth.
Since
I
you're
mean, he's telling
probably
her over.
I would say since you're probably more willing to talk about the MK Ultra stuff compared to a lot of the other researchers who kind of steer away from it a little bit, at least the ones I've talked to have kind of steered away from it. I put a lot more weight into it only because I know about MK Ultra. I've had academics on here discuss MK Ultra. I've had a lot of people mention in the RFK assassination that the polka dot dress thing could have been a mechanism to trigger. So I don't throw it out. I think it makes sense. I do think at this point, I believe Sirhan was a shooter. I just don't think he might have been in full capability of what he was doing. But I definitely believe more than one. I don't believe the blank stuff in the gun. I've heard it mentioned before, but I just feel like that takes a little bit more work. I would believe that more in the John Lennon assassination than I would.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I don't know. Again, Sirhan had a gun and he was shooting. That's again, it's unlike Oswald or James Earl Ray. Um, Nobody can dispute that. So this is a little bit different than those other assassinations because in the case of Oswald, obvious patsy. He didn't shoot anybody. No, sir, as he said. James Earl Ray again, obvious patsy, didn't shoot anybody. But Sirhan was there with a gun, and unlike Oswald and James Earl Ray, Oswald had an intelligence background. Obviously, he was some kind of agent, undercover agent. James Earl Ray was a petty thief, and I really don't know why they picked him, but they did. Patsy. But Sirhan had lots of interesting connections, and I explore some of them in Hidden History. But he uh, he apparently was, and I believe it was RFK and MLK that they had the psychiatrists talk about how he's one of the most susceptible people they've ever seen to being hypnotized. He was a perfect patient for that. So if someone had wanted to hypnotize him and program him into an MK Ultra to Manchurian candidate type of thing, he apparently would have been very easy to do. And again, if you look at his excerpts from his diary, it sure looks like somebody who's been programmed. I mean, a lot of it doesn't make any sense, but he's writing conspiratorial stuff like pay to the order of Sirhan over and over again. he's talking about the Illuminati, which is, like the top tier of, the big conspirators. So I think that I do think he was shooting, but I don't think he was a conspirator in terms of I think he was a patsy, just a different kind of patsy. And he was, for whatever reason, he was led there. Now we don't know what the relationship might have been with the girl in the polka dress or who she even was. So yeah, I mean, it's not impossible that Sirhan was some kind of a low-level agent as well and was sorting with these people for some reason. But he may have just thought he was, following RFK around on his campaign staff. Now later we heard the nonsensical reason that, he whenever he talked about RFK, he usually said he didn't remember. I mean, he always said he didn't remember doing it. But on a few occasions, he said, if I shot him, I remember being angry at him because of he approved the sale of planes to Israel, Palestinian. So, which is ironic because now you see his son, RFK Jr., who's kind of had his own trouble with that, where, he retweeted Roger Waters and some other critics of Israel, and then he quickly backed off, and it's very strange because that's kind of similar to what his father did. So that's what the people that think Sirhan did it, they say, well, he shot him because, he was supporting, the sale of planes as well. I mean, pretty much every politician in America was supporting anything Israel wanted then. So I don't, why would he pick, why would he, I'm pretty sure McCarthy was too, and Humphrey. So
The
why
only
would,
issue with that is why would the LAPD destroy like 2,000 something things of documentation in a medical furnace then?
yes, exactly. Well, and that's the problem with any of these things. If these things are not conspiracies, why does the evidence get destroyed? Including the LAPD destroyed the very crucial, they don't know where they are. The ceiling panels in the pantry contain bullet holes. Most people think there were way more bullets than Sirhan's guns could fire. There was, supposedly a bullet in the door jamb that was photographed and in the newspaper and everything by police officers, and they were mistaken. And nobody knows where that bullet is, where that door is. They lost all kinds of it, lost or destroyed all kinds of evidence. And you're right, you wouldn't do that if you were just documenting a crime. And I mean, same thing, like you wouldn't have all these people. Why would Manny Pena pressure? Just look at that recording of what he did to that poor teenage girl, Sandy Toronto. I mean, he got her in tears eventually.
What?
The,
What?
yeah, yeah. And again, he was playing on her. They were both Hispanic. So he was saying, like, you're a good Catholic. The Kennedys are a good Catholic family. You do want to see them go through this. You think they'd be proud of you. I mean, you got to hear it to believe it. And all she was doing was saying, these people ran out and said, we got him, including the girl in the polka dot dress. And he ridiculed her over and over again, and eventually got her to break down. But that's the kind of investigation they did, and that worked on a lot of other people as well. I mean, I have a lot of the stuff in hidden history. It's not, we talked about William Law. That's my friend William Law. I hope he publishes his book on RFK. I mean, he's got a lot of stuff out there, and I think that'll be the definitive word on it. So let's hope he does that. He knows more about it than I do, but certainly, I mean, as I've said many times, this is tied inextricably to the JFK side. If JFK hadn't been assassinated, RFK never would have been.
So if you're looking at this like a continuum, you had Oswald, alleged shooter. Nobody saw him there. So there you go. You look at RFK assassination. You got Sirhan with a gun shooting, whether it's blanks or not. I mean, you just have a person there shooting. And the number of shots, though, if you look at like 11 or 14, I think I've heard so far. Sirhan, I believe he shot real bullets, but they might have hit people in the back, the ones that bounced all around. It seemed like I don't know if he necessarily put one in RFK if you had all the shots from behind and everyone claims that Sirhan's up front. But it's that method of political assassination. They've only kept trying to tweak the method and perfect it and get it to the point where if I believe it's still continuing, but the number of deaths you start seeing, whether you want to put John Lennon in there or not, there's just a number of weird assassination attempts that come later. And it's like, how come we don't have any of those now? Well, we have character assassination now, but I've just noticed this continuum of, because we've never gotten real closure on the JFK one, if you believe conspiracy. And this is what happens when powers go unchecked for a while. I mean, his fucking brother died in the same way. That's a little bit suspicious. And don't tell me every single person back then was just mentally unstable with a gun. That doesn't make sense to me. I believe that there was something bigger in the works.
Of course, and you don't. We're still trying to get files released for the JFK assassination 6 years later almost, and so Nothing should have been withheld if it was no conspiracy. What national security grounds would you need for a minimum wage loser, Lee Harvey Oswald? What, he had no connections. So he was just impotent, and his wife wasn't satisfied, and he was jealous of Kennedy. I mean, all these nonsensical psychological reasons with no evidence for that at all. But if that was the case, why would you withhold? Why wouldn't everything be released on it? It's an open and shut case. Same thing with James Earl Ray, and certainly with the RFK assassination as well. Again, if this is, why you had RFK Jr. and lobbying for Sirhan's release, and it's his family obviously got in the way of that. Only one of his brothers was there with him, and it's basically the same people that are opposing, same siblings that are opposing his campaign, his presidential campaign. But Bobby has, certainly believes, and he has talked to him, just like Dexter King talked to, and Coretta Scott King talked to James Earl Ray. They went and lobbied for a new trial for him. We knew he didn't kill their father. And same thing with Bobby Kennedy. He wants to know who killed his father, unlike his ridiculous siblings who don't care and who just think he's a conspiracy theorist. So these are important questions, especially now because his son is running for president. And I'm sure you heard the news just a couple of the days that where Joe Biden refused to give him Secret Service protection, which is unbelievable. This is routine for presidential candidates. And of all candidates, a Kennedy, probably the most likely to be assassinated given historical precedents. That's the guy you won't. I mean, what do they expect people to think when you do that kind of thing?
Do you know when they found RFK, or not RFK, Sirhan's diary after he allegedly shot RFK?
Um, I think it was. I don't think it was hidden anywhere. I think they found it at his home. I'm pretty sure it was pretty.
Because it had RFK must die written all over it, but then all the Masonic symbols, which I think people just thought was the Star of David in court, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah, you've heard it. It would be ironic if you considering he was so upset over Israel getting the planes, but that wouldn't make much sense. But people can read into that way, but if you look at it, it's not the product of a rational, whatever Sirhan was at the time, 20 years old or something like that. He was a very young guy. It's not the product of a rational mind. Something's going on there. We do know, and of course, you have Jolly and West, who was got involved in this as well, and then people
Wait, what?
famously, Dr. Jolly and West, who was involved in a lot of the old CIA work going back to the 50s, and I believe he's the one that killed a killed an elephant with LSD or something. These
Yeah.
guys were just
Well, I
monsters.
know about Jolly West, but I didn't know Jolly West was connected to the RFK stuff.
I think he is, but I could be wrong. Maybe it's only indirectly because you had that guy Wilson, that guy Bryant. I can't remember the actress, but I maybe he was tied to West or whatever. But so he had been talked to. Or Jolly and West. I know Jolly and West visited Jack Ruby,
Yeah.
and of course Jack Ruby. Uh, Unlike Oswald, many people had speculated that Ruby was programmed. Oh,
I don't think Ruby was programmed. I think Ruby was wrapped up pretty tight with the whole cancer cell injection, whatever you want to believe. I
well,
mean,
he could have been, but you have that. If you watch the movie The Manchurian Candidate, actually that, and also The Man Who Knew Too Much, the Hitchcock movie, they were both kind of based on. Basically, they said that somebody could be programmed to kill, and there would have to be a triggering mechanism. I think in The Man Who Knew Too Much, I think it was some note in the song, or so, I can't remember. It's been a long time since I've seen it. But something had to happen in the music or something, and then the guy was going to kill who he was programmed to kill. Manchurian Candidate said the same kind of thing, where there would be a code word or something he would kill. If you watch the footage of Jack Ruby shooting Oswald, you'll notice that there's a mysterious horn,
was
car
three.
horn.
There's
Yeah,
three.
yeah, three. But it's right, and that a lot of people speculate, is that what triggered him? Because he walks down to the basement and then soon as okay, this is it, and then he rushes forward and kills him. I don't know, but it's an interesting thing. And with Sirhan, who knows what the triggering mechanism was? The cup of coffee. I mean, he said that's the last thing he remembers. The girl, as he said, was probably the girl in the polka dot dress. So there are a lot of strange psychological things going on there. They're not, in RFK. There's
When would he have got programmed though?
who's Sirhan?
Yeah. Did he have any activities before where that seemed a little bit suspicious?
Well, we know that he was seen by many people with the girl in the polka dot dress, who wasn't in the polka dot dress all the time, but it looked like the same girl. Again, she had a great figure and a very strange nose, so she stood out. And another Arab type person. Usually, he was with one or two other Arab type people as well. And I got all these things from, I think it was Turner and Hickles' book, but I've got them in Hidden History. But there are lots of I don't have them memorized, but there were lots of interesting sightings like that. And so he was clearly doing something. We know that he worked at a racetrack back in it's a mafia years. It was Santa Anita racetrack. So you know, he clearly, I don't think he was your average person. And he was also, again, he was open in terms of being hypnotized. So I don't know what the people that look to try to find patsies, what they look for in these people, but they must have seen something it looks like that they liked in Sirhan, because getting him, he was a susceptible subject, and they clearly
It's
wanted to do.
definitely people with like a political polarizational view of what the mainstream probably is at the time. If you have Oswald like a communist or painted like a communist, even though he denounced he was a Marxist, or then you have Sirhan, where you have a foreign person that people would just assume that, oh, he's doing this because of this political motivation with Israel or whatever it is. There's always that, like the politic thing always gets dragged in. Like this person had this political agenda. That's why he killed this person, which it doesn't make sense if you kind of line it up. But I believe that they are able to steamroll him in court so much because of the fact that he was a foreign person. And in court, they believe that like they could easily it's a clear cut case, it's much like Oswald being dead. You could easily rip right through his human rights or anything you want because, yeah, he's dead.
I mean, to the average American in 1968, that somebody named Sirhan Bashar Sirhan is like, oh, he's got to be guilty. I mean, it sounds pretty foreign to me. I mean, you're right. They would. It'd be much easier to demonize somebody like that, and I think they were. I mean, Sirhan didn't have any defenders for quite a while. It wasn't. It was a little bit different than the JFK assassination, where it took a few years before people started to analyze. Okay, well, you had people like Paul Schrade, who I had on my show, who just died last year. I think it was 97 or something. Incredible. Very very lucid right up to the end. But good people like that, they worked for the truth.
You said Paul Schrade was lucid?
Who was lucid right to the end. He was very, he had everything together at 97 years old.
Well, people say that because he defended Sirhan, and went to all his parole hearings that happened. But everyone said that was because he got hit in the head. He might be dealing with a little bit of after effects from it.
Well, again, that's easy. That's easy for somebody to say he's trying to defend the narrative. But I had him on my show a couple times, and you can listen to the archives out there. He's sharp. He was sharp as a tack right up to the end. I mean, late 90s, and he knew it because he was very critical of the Kennedy family too. Talked about Bobby being courageous, and he talked about trying to talk to those kids. I mean, you can listen to the archive; it's amazing because he knew them all. And he said, it's just really sad where they don't care. He said they would laugh about it. That's what he talked about. Which is really strange. But he was an incredible witness. But yeah, he was shot in the head, so I guess that would be an easy response on the part of people. Well, of course he was hit in the head. That's why he thinks he's experiencing. But again, you just look at the ballistics. There's too many bullets for Sirhan's gun. It's that simple. And he was never. There's no witness that placed him behind Kennedy, and that's where the fatal shot came from. So,
Who do they suspect being the second person? Is it Caesar?
well, that's what Bobby Kennedy Jr. thought, and that's what most people seem to think. I don't know. Dan Eugene Caesar he was connected to Eighth Security. He had some connections too. I don't know that it's been proven it was him. I don't know. But people did say that he had a gun. I think there were others there that probably had guns too. And um, who was the girl in the polka dot dress? Who were the guys running out with her? There were seen by a couple of people saying we shot him. Who are those people? That wasn't Thane Eugene Caesar. So um, I really don't know. I think that it's like with the JFK assassination. People ask me, these. I don't speculate. All I do is I look with the evidence. The evidence shows that there were too many bullets, and that Sirhan wasn't in the right position to have fired the fatal shot. So I think you start with that they got it wrong. Just like in the JFK assassination, we still don't know who actually shot Jay, but we know that they proved, even they inadvertently proved, it wasn't Oswald. Whoever did it wasn't Oswald. So they got framed, and then they're still framing, still going to a lot of trouble 60 years later. There's this line. Same thing with Sirhan, where we know there was more than one shooter, just the ballistics show that. There's a lot of intrigue there swirling around Sirhan's diary. Was he a Manchurian candidate? The girl in the polka dot dress. All these things are interesting. We can just kind of speculate on that's how they may have programmed them, but we don't know. But I just prefer to say that, that the ballistics show that there had to have been more than one.
Do you believe that it's a deep state thing, or do you believe that it's just a small kind of thing? I know people hinted that he was going to open up the investigation into his brother's death, which I think has a lot of weight to it. But also, LAPD just obviously shit investigation on purpose, it seems like, with the destruction of evidence and all that type of stuff. Makes it very difficult to understand this, where I go, that just seems like they didn't want another Dallas, like the guy said in the video you can watch. And he seemed like they really fucked up, because within 3 hours, they announced that it was just Sirhan. That was it. 3 hours. So if you're wrong, you better get rid of that evidence to support any wrong conclusions that might bring out what your conclusion is.
That's what it was. It was again, if you look at it, there would be no destruction of evidence. And the LAPD, I mean, all these police forces are corrupt. Dallas, and certainly LAPD, probably has the worst reputation maybe in the country. We know about it for the years later under Gates and everything. But so it's not surprising that they would be involved in, covering something up or whatever. This is a huge crime. I mean, this is a presidential candidate guy. I have no doubt that Bobby Kennedy would have been president. Watch that funeral procession afterwards. No question he would have been elected president. Behind the scenes, Mark Lane, who was my mentor, I started out, as a teenager volunteering for Citizens Committee of Inquiry. He was my hero. He's the reason I became a civil libertarian. And, he told everyone that, behind the scenes, Bobby Kennedy, he was going to reopen the assassination. And that Jim Garrison was saying the same thing, that both of them were saying that Bobby should say it publicly, because publicly he was supporting the Warren report. Behind the scenes, he wasn't. And I think he basically said, I can't do this until I'm elected. So he felt, but, as Garrison said, you'd be safer if you talked about it now, because then, it would make it more obvious that they killed you. But he didn't, unfortunately, and chose to go that way. And now you see his son. I never thought I'd see a presidential candidate, let alone a Kennedy, running for president openly saying the things I've been saying for decades, that the government killed JFK and RFK. And that's, I think, the primary reason, not necessarily the vaccine stuff. I think although that certainly plays a part too, but I think that's the primary reason why he's getting the horrible press that he's getting. He's attacked relentlessly. He's saying the government killed the Kennedys, and you don't do that. But there's no question. I think that that these crimes were connected. I don't think it was anything small. I don't think any of these things are small. And that's why in the JFK assassination, I'm going to have a book coming out with William Law. William Law and I wrote it. It's going to be called Pipe the Bimbo in Red. And it's about Dean Andrews and Jim Garrett and other people in New Orleans. What I call the ground level plot to kill Kennedy. And that'll be coming out. Should be coming out in time for the 60th anniversary. That's why we're trying to move it for that. But so that it's kind of it's not necessarily a direct response, because I wrote about that in history, and everything I write about, I talk about there are people out there that like to promote the idea that these first of all, that these things are separate. I don't think usually they are separate. Certainly, Kennedy assassination.
Be a hell of a coincidence if it was all.
Yeah, exactly. Separate. Yeah, and Martin Luther King too. I mean, these things are kind of linked, and I don't think this would have happened if it had been JFK. But people say, "Oh, I can accept that it was the mafia, maybe a few rogue CIA agents." No, it doesn't. This is, these. That's why people that talk about Clay Shaw and David Ferry and all those people at the ground level. Those people were what I call the ground level conspirators. They were the ones who were probably all intelligence operators themselves, like Oswald was. They may have all been told the same thing like Oswald. Oswald, I firmly believe, as Jim Garrison did, was told that he was supposed to infiltrate a plot to kill the president and report back to the FBI or whoever on it. And I think that's what he was doing.
We got to try and stick to the RFK things.
Okay, sorry about that. But in the case of, so RFK, I would say the same thing in terms of I don't think it was a small limited thing. Certainly not the LAPD. I think it was again part of the same deep state high crime that was the JFK assassination. It was a continuation of that because, and I think later JFK Jr. As I showed in history, I was the first one to come out and say this was an assassination, folks. They killed him because it's a continuation. And RFK Jr., unless he gets bought out or something, that would be the same price he would pay in terms of it because they're just the dominoes would start falling on just those significant crimes as it were. And they're all tied together. They're not. You see the same players involved in each of them. And in terms of RFK, instead of Dallas police, it was the LAPD, but the FBI certainly was involved as well. Shane O'Sullivan is one of the guys who originally thought there was a CIA guy was maybe photographed there, and later they tried to debunk that. I really don't know. I'm trying to talk to him to figure out what happened there. But so there were lots of powerful forces that that had an interest in killing RFK Jr. I mean RFK, and I think the main reason was they feared him exposing the truth about it, and that
Do
couldn't
you
have that.
do you find conflicting views about the acoustical evidence, just like in the JFK case with the RFK case? I've seen like various opinions on the acoustical evidence, some people that believe it and some people that don't. But overall, that acoustic evidence, I don't know if it came in the second investigation or the first investigation, the second one back into the RFK case, right?
Yeah, well, it's there are people supposedly there are tapes that exist and everything where you can hear the audio. But uh, you know, acoustic evidence certainly in the JFK case, I don't trust that. I think there's a lot of question behind that. But in the RFK, I don't know if it's that much more valid. But again, I don't think that would ever be the best evidence. It's people are unless it's like I've heard some of the tapes of JFK and it's not clear at all, really. Not like it's like looking at some of those photographs and saying, who's in the doorway and this stuff. Not clear enough. And same thing with RFK. I think I would prefer to stay away from that. And again, I would concentrate on what I think is the most important thing, the best evidence. The autopsy indicates that ballistics don't add up. That unless somebody can prove, that Sirhan was where he wasn't, according to all the witnesses, couldn't have fired the fatal shot. So then you start looking for, well, okay, why was he firing? Did he really was he connected to the second gunman? If he wasn't connected to the second gunman, then obviously you have him set up there as a patsy. And unfortunately, Sirhan's still with us. He's still alive.
Are there
And
photos of him up front? I haven't been able to find any.
photos, yeah, I have plenty of photos. I don't know when the last one was taken, but I mean, I think he's 77,
No, no, no. I mean
78.
photos of him up front in front of Robert Kennedy.
Well, no, that's the problem is that, this just like the JFK assassination, very curiously that you have video of that entire campaign event, all to Chicago, let's win there. And then he curiously is led by his entourage. They take a route back through the pantry, which was not part of his security arrangement. Very strangely, no one has really questioned that. And back in the pantry, they I think primarily they weren't expecting him to go back there, so there were no cameras conveniently. And as Scott Endert, you say you're going to have on later. That's why they went. Maybe you can ask him why he thought that they spent so many years trying to keep his photos and not give them back. But he was the only one, as far as I know, that took any kind of photographs in the pantry. And I don't think even he's sure what they show, but they may have shown Sirhan's position. But other than that, we just have to go on what the witnesses said because there's no photographic evidence at all. We had much more in the JFK assassination, but here, once he took that trip back to the pantry, there was nothing other than Scott Enyart, and until later, obviously after the pandemic, then you see the picture of him lying on the floor with the waiter bent over and so forth. But
Well, that clip-on tie that I thought was Robert Kennedy's was stained Eugene Caesar's, the one that's in the corner that the magazine cut out.
that's what I've heard. That's what I've heard, and it's well, it's unfortunate these crimes because you don't have because if it was on film, like if the JFK assassination, the press truck had been where it normally was up front, and the entire thing would have been filmed, but they mysteriously were taken to the back and put on a bus. You can figure out why. But in the RFK case, it was just a detour where instead of so I think if he had gone to I think he was supposed to go to I think there was a reception or something. I forget where he was supposed to go, but he didn't go where he was supposed to go. So I assume where he was supposed to go, they would have had cameras set up, but there was nothing back in the pantry. So, and if you wanted to kill him, I would look at that little detour and why was it taken? Pushed it because that conveniently put him in a spot where there was no record of what happened. All you have, and eyewitness testimony. That's the important thing in any case. People who poo-poo conspiracy theories are right in one sense that eyewitness testimony is not generally that credible. People will say different stuff, but in the case of the Kennedy assassinations, both of them, we've had to rely largely on eyewitness testimony in many cases because that's what we have. Because the real evidence is constantly being destroyed. You said in the LAPD has destroyed so much stuff, including the ceiling panels. Those are crucial. Trying to figure out exactly what happened. The door jam, was there a bullet there? Well, we don't know. It's not available. So all we can do is say, well, the witness, I saw a bullet there, and yep, that's not the best evidence, but I don't know what you can do, and there's no film. You can't say, as you said, that would be the easiest thing. Let's look where was Sirhan standing. Let's see where he was standing. We don't know. There's no film.
I agree that the best evidence would be the autopsy because that would prove, but you'd also need the proof of Sirhan up front as well too. Besides witness testimonies, you need photos of that, and sadly, those are probably destroyed. So they definitely cut off their loose ends about it. I mean, but look at Thomas Noguchi; he lost his job and had to fight to get it back. I mean, that's obviously clear that the official narrative was not agreeing with what his conclusions were on a 36-page autopsy report that was very thorough, considered one of the best autopsies in history.
Yeah, exactly. And again, why were there, why were they so anxious to get rid of him? I mean, it was all, and again, why was the Frank Sinatra so incensed at John Barber that he cut off his? I mean, he was his personal writer.
That's what's weird to me. It's like Frank Sinatra was in the Rat Pack, wasn't he? But I don't know.
Yeah, well,
You'd
well,
think he would want an answer.
well, you would think, but there had been, Sinatra ended up being bitter against the Kennedys because old Joe Kennedy wanted once JFK became president, he really kept his distance from him. He thought, look, this guy has mob connections, and it's not a good look. And so he may have had some bitterness from that. I don't know how much he ever liked Robert Kennedy. A lot of people like JFK didn't like RFK. RFK was blunt, and JFK was a constant tactful guy, kind to everyone. Nobody had a bad thing to say about him. But RFK Jr. could be argumentative, and he could he let you know what he thought. He wasn't as good a politician. So it may have been something like that, but I don't know. I can't other than Noguchi's findings, were evidence of a conspiracy. I think it's as simple as that. That's why they tried to get rid of him. And you can figure, okay, if this was a small, self-contained conspiracy, who's trying to get rid of him? Some small renegade mafia group? I don't think they have the power to do that. So again, these are things that happen in these cases. Just tell you how powerful the people have to be. I mean, 60 years later, we're coming up on the 60th anniversary. You're still going to hear the same old lies. That's not anti-Castro Cubans, renegade officers. They don't have the power 60 years later to make people still lie about it. Same thing with RFK. When you just had the um, when you had the 40th year, or whatever, the 50th year, it was the same old lies, the same kind of things in the media. Why are you? Who has the power to get everybody in the entertainment world, pretty much? Whenever Hollywood makes, other than Oliver Stone, whenever Hollywood makes a movie about one of these things, they had a thing about RFK a few years back. It was about his last night or whatever, but it purposely didn't go into. It very conveniently didn't go into anything about the shooting because they'd like to leave that alone. Because once you analyze that, it brings up unpleasant questions like, wait, people lied here. So in the RFK assassination, a lot you can have a real investigation of this would look at people like Manny Pena and all these other people on the police force who clearly tried to subvert justice, badgering witnesses, and they got other witnesses to lie as too. And I'm drawing a blank on their names. It was father and son. God, um, and I apologize. I wasn't sure we are going to talk about RFK. I would have looked on. I write about so many of these things, and I don't do that many interviews on this. But they had told uh, stories I believe about the polka dot dress, the girl in the polka dress, or seeing again Sirhan with someone else, and they were pressured into changing their story, and that happens a lot in these cases. And again, who's pressuring them? If Sirhan did it alone, is his family pressuring them? And that's why I say, when these witnesses get threatening phone calls, who's doing that? You're going to ask Scott Enyart when you talk to him later who he was supposed when he was supposed to finally get his film back. There was a car accident. The film was lost.
I thought someone broke into a car and stole some stuff.
Well, yeah, maybe it was that. I thought it was car, but yeah, but they definitely it was supposed to be delivered and it was stolen or whatever. But why would anybody steal that? If it was Sirhan's family? Who's doing this? If you could maybe understand if they're doing that and then trying to profit financially off it, but they're not. They never see the light of day. Maybe if somebody did that and then tried to sell them on the black market and make money, no, but they never do. So there's the only motive there is to continue to cover up things. So that's, I think, everything that happens in the aftermath of these cases tells you there was a conspiracy and it involves very powerful forces. We know the FBI hated the Kennedys and J. Edgar Hoover really hated Bobby Kennedy. So, the FBI again is involved in these investigations. So this is an outfit headed by a guy who despised RFK. RFK wanted him fired when he's attorney general. And, Hoover was an institution in Washington. So he's overseeing an investigation. Do you think he's going to see that the truth comes out? I mean, these people hated the Kennedys and they actually hated RFK more than JFK because RFK was he was like the bad cop to JFK's good cop a lot of times in terms of the mafia or Hoover or any of these guys, LBJ. He would always say what he thought. And he would, he didn't sugarcoat it, and JFK was more tactful, diplomatic. But so lots of people, there were tons of people, the powerful people that would have loved to see RFK die, even on just a personal level, not even so much a political level.
Did you find it weird that Bugliosi believed conspiracy in the RFK case, but not the JFK case?
Yeah, very strange. I mean, and Bugliosi did some good work initially with RFK. So did Robert Vaughn, who was a famous actor who was one of the stars of Man from Uncle television show back in the '60s, and so did he's become my friend, kind of my friend on social media, Paul Lamont, who was one of the stars of American Graffiti. He was briefly a big star back in the day, and he worked a lot with those guys back in the day, Robert Vaughn and some of the other people, the Bugliosi, and that were trying to get a new case, a new investigation. And in fact, Bugliosi, I think, ran for attorney or something, and it was where he ran on a platform that I'm going to reopen the RFK case. And Paul Lamont still believes somebody poisoned him. And to this day, he hasn't felt right since. Decades later, he survived, but to this day, I can't get him to talk. I tried to get him on the show and stuff, and he says, no, that got me in trouble before. They won't talk about it. And his acting career, is kind of weird.
Why do you think the family's been silent of JFK's family? Why is it only Carolyn and I think Robert RFK Jr. are the only two that have really been wanting a new investigation?
Well, Carolyn definitely not. No, you're talking about JFK's only daughter left. That she's JFK Jr. Yes, behind the
It's
scenes.
Carolyn or Caroline?
Caroline.
Caroline.
No, Caroline has been. She's pretty much leading the cover up, and her grandson now, who I think Wattsburg or something, they're trying to promote him as the next candidate, and they won't. They'll leave him alone. This guy has already made several speeches talking about how conspiracy. We need to talk about their life, and he's completely woke, and he's perfect. They'll use him if they can. But Caroline's anecdotal evidence. I've talked to people who've known both of them, and Caroline, from all accounts, is not that pleasant a person. JFK Jr. was great. Behind the scenes, I talked to his high school girlfriend and other people that knew him. Behind the scenes, he was obsessed with his father. That's what he was working. And he was fighting his family because nobody else in the family wanted to until later RFK Jr. did. And now he's openly doing it. But you're right, the Kennedy family, and that's been one of the impediments to all of us. And I've questioned the Kennedy family many times. I don't know why. I look at the Martin Luther King family, and his family were profiles in courage. Coretta Scott King, even his widow in advanced age, traveled to another state to testify for James Earl Ray. His sons visited him in prison. They both publicly said, I don't think he killed our father. I wish the Kennedys did that. Until RFK Jr. did, nobody did. And but they just prefer to remain quiet, and they basically hate their brother for talking about it. I don't know why. They certainly weren't part of any conspiracy to kill him, but it's just been a curious attitude, and it hasn't been helpful to those people trying to find the truth.
I think it's pretty strange. I mean, I don't know. RFK or not RFK Jr. JFK Jr. is another one I got to look into a little bit more because that's very, very suspicious, and I think that one's
I could talk all day about that. Yeah.
But it can't be fear. The family can't be afraid of them being knocked off. It seems like it's a little bit more than that. Like even with looking through some of the witnesses that ended up changing their mind. I mean, you can say coercion as well too, but there's also like, did somebody get paid? Like, did Boogie Lucy get paid to write a tomb on the JFK assassination and then on RFK?
I said at the beginning because once I started looking at the JFK assassination, that RFK attracted me first because I saw Allard Lowenstein, and I said, "Well, God, there's a million times more evidence of conspiracy than the JFK assassination. There's just more written about it and more known." And but for Bugliosi to see conspiracy in RFK but not JFK, he's got to be the only person on earth, and I could never understand. And then he writes that ridiculous book, history. What the hell is it? Claiming
Doesn't
history?
Matter. Doesn't matter.
Yeah, whatever. But just a horrible book, warm commission rehash. And but I don't know. Maybe I don't know if he until he died, if he still believes RFK was assassination. If he went back on that as well, I don't know. But he did some good work initially, so I got to give him credit. In the hidden history, I talk about that, and I credit him where he did. Another guy that did some really good work was Dan Mulvea, who wrote a really good book on the RFK assassination, where he delineates all the conspiracy evidence, and pretty much the reader is okay, yeah, obviously there were at least two gunmen, and then in the last chapter, he suddenly reverses forms and says, "Suddenly, I realized Sirhan had been lying to me, and that he did it." Like, and it's just so. It's like somebody told him, "Put this chapter in, and we'll publish your book." I mean, I actually tried to communicate with him a couple times over the years.
Maybe because he didn't want to get killed. He was like, maybe I should just add this at the end.
Well, he's a guy that dances around the edges of these issues. He tried to talk about gambling, sports being fixed. It's another subject I think that sports, but
I think there's evidence to support that.
Yeah. Well, he danced around it though. He nibbles around the edges, but he does. So he same thing with Vince Foster. He wrote a ridiculous book, ending the official narrative of Vince Foster. Dude, did you read the Secret Service memo that's out there that says Vince Foster's body was found in his car, which contradicts everything about the crime scene? Did you miss that? But that's the kind of guy he is. So I gave him credit. He did a lot of good research on RFK, but then he just inexplicably, and I tried to ask him, look, you can't just say you did all this great research and you showed it was a conspiracy, and then you say suddenly I realized he'd been lying. Wait, that's evidence? That's like woke identity politics now. I just knew. I knew he was guilty. That's what you're seeing in courtrooms now.
Well, that's like the real problem with conspiracies. Is I believe conspiracies are real, and obviously it's legal language to say so. Now, does everything in a great orchestrated Illuminati-sized plot? No, but there is a lot of things that don't make sense, and the reason why they don't make sense, you can rationalize to government cover-up or something of that sort. But also, it's even like with the books that come out. A lot of books come out, and necessarily are they just looking for just a click headline, a little clip of this? I've seen many journalists now, and apparently a guy who's doing multiple shows talking about the JFK was killed because he wanted to expose UFOs. I'm sure he was interested in it, but there's no fucking way that it was because of UFOs. There's a whole other slew of information out there that does that. And it's like, I mean, at this point, I don't care if people want to, like, obviously I understand people making a buck, but when you're going and running around like this is definitive 100% and nobody else is right, it's like as dumb as saying Jack Ruby didn't shoot Oswald.
Yeah, there's a lot of people that say that too. Yeah,
if you believe it, that's one thing. But if you're doing it because you're trying to make money, fuck you. I hate to say it like that, but it really pisses me off.
Well, it is, and a lot of times these waters get polluted because people tell me all the time, "You think everything's a conspiracy?" And I say, "Yes, I do." I don't back down from anything because I think that the people that run us, people that have the power to conspire at that level, they are conspirators. That's what they do. They do that for a living. They're conspiring against the public interest all the time. They literally don't know any other way to behave. It's the way they do business, the way they've always done business. Someone gets in your way, you smear them or kill them. I mean, the evidence is everywhere. In all my writings, you can see all the unnatural deaths. And we can see today the ones that aren't killed, the Julian Assanges and Mannings and Snowdens that they might as well be assassinated because they're treated like that. That's the way they treat whistleblowers, which is basically effectively anybody that's blowing the whistle on any part of their corruption. That's what they're doing. And so that's why I think when people say they don't have to be big conspiracies, well, maybe sometimes they don't. When Bill Clinton was governor of Arkansas, and he had the huge body count there. I mean, I think he probably could have had a lot of those witnesses knocked off without needing much more than the Arkansas police.
Do you
What
know if I got to ask you this because we talked about Bill Clinton in the past, but do you know if that Bill Clinton was the driver for Hale Boggs's car to the airport?
I think I was the first one to point that out in hidden history. Yeah, I wrote. I have it in. Yeah, he was a
Jesus.
very young man, and
God.
and of course I was pointing out technically I wasn't true. As I said, he drove him on his he dropped him off for his flight to oblivion. Technically, he dropped him off at the airport, and then he had a connecting flight after that to oblivion. But he still drove him to the airport.
I know that's fucking weird.
Yeah, and he was, again, we're told Bill Clinton was like all these people. The lore is they come from poverty, or they're nobody knows they came from nowhere.
They come
Somehow
from
he's
tubes bred into the deep state machine.
well, he was in a position of power somehow to drive a powerful political figure like Hale Boggs to the airport. So he was being groomed to something. Just like it's no mistake when he was at the White House as a Boy Scout. He's the one they took the picture of smiling and shaking the hands of Jay. I mean, come on, what are the odds of that? I mean, maybe somebody took a picture of every one of them. I don't know, but I doubt it. But that photograph is out there. But yeah, so Clinton is. You have these things. There's so many of these crimes, and it's hard to keep up with them. So some are bigger than others. I mean, they're not all on the level of 9/11 or something like that, or even JFK assassination. They're top tier ones. The other ones, that you have like ones that people don't know that much about, like Joe Scarborough. When he was a congressman with the blonde girl that was found dead in his office with a big gash in her head. They hushed that up completely, and then he leaves Congress and becomes suddenly switches to the left and becomes a huge talking head for the state. But so that's not that big of a crime, but they still have an interest in covering it up. I don't know how many people they need, but something like JFK 9/11, you're talking about you need the deep state to be involved in that.
I want to get back to just a couple things on the RFK one. I mean, do you think it's going to be a tough moral question, but I mean, honestly, at this point, Sirhan's been in prison for 50 something years. So it's kind of like, I know the lawyers were just trying to keep him out of the death penalty, but is that a life to live? To be 100% honest, I mean, like, why is nobody taking another investigation or looking at the evidence or just getting rid of him? And then Gavin Newsom decides to come out and be like, oh no, we're going to deny his parole for the political implications. It's like, well, what's the point? He's been in there for 50 years. I'm pretty sure that's more than a life sentence for whatever murder. So at this point, it's just like, it's a shenanigan. It's a political backlash, and it's something else connected in it.
There is, and again, I'm not one. I mean, I don't really see. I don't know how important it would be if Sirhan got paroled because it's not going to change anything. He's probably still going to say he doesn't remember anything. I don't think he's going to suddenly regain his memory. So you can argue that it's certainly 50 years, even if he had shot RFK, if he said, but by virtue of who he shot, that's the way it always is. Somebody that famous, well, they're going to treat it as a bigger crime. So why should we ever let him out? So, but don't think it's not going to change anything because it's not going to make us closer to the truth because Sirhan would suddenly going to regain his memory and talk about, well, this is what happened. That's never going to happen. Obviously, either the programming worked too well on it, or he's not telling the truth or whatever. But I don't get caught up in. I mean, I'm more interested in all the people that are in prison that were innocent, or and there's tons of them, or were unfairly convicted or served way too long for petty sentences. I'd much rather concentrate on those people. I don't concentrate on that as much. I understand Bobby Kennedy's position, but I just, I think people need to work more with it to see if he can remember more. But he just doesn't seem to do that. He just keeps saying, "I don't remember," and I don't know how far you can go with that.
When it comes to the field of political assassinations, do you think it's important that people understand a lot of these political assassinations, whether you believe conspiracy or not, but just understand the implications of political assassinations in general? I've talked to David Denton, who teaches a course on it, but I'm interested in your thoughts on it because you know a little bit deeper than David Denton might teach to his students.
Yeah, I know David, but yeah, it's well, I think
Because right now I'm looking at everything. The JFK stuff's a house of cards. You're solving it all if you end up getting answers on one. You challenge every other single one. But there's JFK, RFK, MLK, Malcolm X, Fred Hampton, which is more of a local one than it is a giant one. But still, it's an assassination. It's like eventually this whole 60s and 70s time period is just a mix mash
George
of
Wallace and Reagan's attempted assassination. But Reagan was the last high-profile assassination attempt. There has not been an attempt on a political figure. That's talking about 43 years ago. So assassination is kind of passe in terms of official. Now, I talk about all the unnatural deaths in my book. I think a lot of these people are assassinated, especially witnesses, but they're not officially, said to be that way. But the last official assassination attempt was on Reagan 43 years ago. So they've clearly determined this is not what they're going to do anymore. And they do other things where they get rid of people, they demonize them, and whatever. They use other methods. So we can study the assassinations of the '60s, but it was just a way they did business then. And I think they do it differently now. Maybe they don't have as many political figures at work. Like if Trump was legitimate, I don't think he is, but if he was legitimate, he might have been a candidate for assassination. But if you take him on his face value, which I don't, then you can argue, well, they decided to go another route with him and just nonstop smear campaign, and now they're going to prosecute him for everything. Again, I don't. I call him Trumpenstein. I mean, so people can read about what I think about him. But that would be if they were still assassinating people. He would certainly be somebody you would think that Ron Paul, when Ron Paul was running, they were still assassinating people that were potential enemies of the state. Those are the kind of people you would expect to see assassination attempts on, and or you could argue Rand Paul has been the victim of several curious incidents, not really assassination,
his
but
neighbor popped his lung or whatever it is.
yeah, yeah, and he also had his office burned down recently. Him and his wife were attacked in Washington D.C. So I don't understand that because on the surface, Rand Paul is kind of a very pale imitation of Ron Paul. He's nowhere near as radical, but it is what it is. So people and some people think that that softball game incident where the guy's Scully, what was the guy's name?
I
Scott.
forgot who it was. It was Senator Kennedy, I think his name was.
Well, no, Scott. I can't believe I can't think of his name. But anyhow, a lot of people speculate the guy out there shooting, the Bernie Sanders supporter, we never hear about. Nobody knows his name. He was trying to go after Rand Paul. He shot the other guy, Steve Scalia. Steve Scalia by mistake, but who knows? But so that's the closest you've come, I guess, to an old-fashioned assassination that's happened. It's ironic because gun shootings are up everywhere else. You have these school shootings all the time, these mass shootings that a lot of us have speculated about. But you don't in the political world, other than the incident at the softball game, and that was what I don't know 5 6 years ago. Um, that's the only one I can think of since 1980. So it's kind of a
Senator Kennedy, whoever that guy is, he's an older man.
yeah. John Kennedy. His
He
name's John
said
Kennedy.
something that was so fucking hilarious, where he said one thing, he's like two truths and a lie. One, my tie's red. One, we're in court right now, and three, Epstein didn't kill himself. And I said that, and I just started busting out laughing. I was like, this guy. I was like, look, whether you agree with his politics or not, I love it that he's treating these court cases as everyone is kind of receiving it. It's a it's a circus act, man. And I appreciate that we don't have really anybody that's ever challenged the system in such a sense. I mean, Trump, sure, but it's all a show. It's all just make believe. This is what we want you to see, and the real stuff that you never get to see, which hopefully the public's being aware of now. I think at this point now you have a number of people that are talking about the UFO stuff, but everyone's like, who gives a crap?
Yeah, yeah, you're right. And I speculate about that. I used to study UFOs quite a bit too, and I really don't understand what how they're suddenly coming forth and saying these things are real, and they demonize people and ridicule them and ruin their lives for decades for saying they've seen them.
People killed
So
themselves
yeah,
back in the day.
yeah,
People killed themselves.
yeah,
So
absolutely.
I think the government's covered just using that because there's a lot of that other COVID and other material out there that's been floating around. And now recently Biden has said that we don't have to declassify any more documents on the JFK assassination.
Yeah,
So
is that something? Yeah, that's amazing. Well, and again, it's ridiculous that anything is still withheld on JFK, but I disagree with the research community a lot that any of these files, it's anything that's being withheld on JFK or anything else is you're not going to get a blueprint of what they're going to announce to the participants in the conspiracy were. They're just there. There's everything. I mean, you may find things that are relevant to people like me who've been studying this for a long time. I mean, but to the general public, it's not going to be any smoking gun or anything like that. So I think again, the research community concentrates on the wrong thing. They should be concentrating on the fact that they're still lying about this 6 years later. They're still lying about these assassinations and their nonsensical explanations. Where we're the only country in the world where Americans have been bred to believe that when a politician gets killed in America, this goes back to Lincoln. It's well, Lincoln, you could argue they make claims, but certainly Garfield. Go back to Garfield, McKinley, and all certainly up through Kennedy. The assassination is always because of some bizarre reason. John Hinckley had to shoot Ronald Reagan because of Jodie Foster. There's never a political reason for a politician getting shot.
have you seen her?
Yeah.
Have
Oh, but I have more. My upcoming book. In fact, I'm going to sign a contract on it. I hope today, but I think I'm going to have to retitle it. It's basically more hidden history. No, it might be called American Memory Hole, but it's going to have more on JFK, JFK Jr., 9/11, Oklahoma City, a lot of stuff, but also going back to Lincoln and all that too. It's kind of a combination of the first two hidden history books. But I discovered something there, and I don't. I just a tease. I don't give it away, but I discovered something there that people will be shocked about in terms of Jodie Foster and John Hancock. I'll just leave it at that. It'll be shocking. It'll be a bombshell. So that's one of the many bombshells that will be in that book. Because you look deeper into these things, and you see that they are lying about everything, and that we don't know how much of this is a show and how much of it isn't. But they continue to lie about it. And so this assassination, certainly the RFK assassination, over 50 years later, talking about still, I guess, his 55th year anniversary of it. They still can't tell the truth about it, and that's what just basic facts. And somebody like me with the platforms I have, I can't compete with somebody that whatever historian the History Channel trots out to just say absolutely. Because not all these guys, when they talk about these subjects, they're not necessarily just lying; they're just incredibly uninformed. They're like a substitute high school teacher in terms of they know nothing about the subject matter. And they'll get up there and they'll have C-SPAN and CNN and Fox and all these huge platforms. And somebody like me is not invited, where I could school them very easily and make them look foolish. But we're not given the opportunity. So that's the problem is the public still, they're looking at those large platforms and that's where they're getting their information from. So all young people that even care about something like the RFK at this point, and more might because of the son running, but thank goodness his son is telling the truth because he's the only antidote at this point to the lies that these crimes were done by lone nuts.
Well, Don, I appreciate the time you gave me to talk about the RFK assassination and other stuff, but is there a place where people can find your links?
Yeah, I'm shadow banned everywhere except Substack. So please support me at Substack. It's the last free speech platform. Donald Jeffries at Substack.com. I protest. It's like my show that live streams every Friday.
They
My
banned my link tree. Did you know that?
no, do they?
All it had was a YouTube, a Spotify, and a store link for some shirts. And they said that you're putting up harmful content and it violates Linktree services. I said, what the fuck are you talking about?
Yeah, it's the I can't talk enough about that or write enough about it. It's disgraceful what we've allowed to happen, and they don't care because it's happening to people like us. Maybe if it happens to them, they'll care. but they just think we're nuts, and we're dealing in these delusions, and
But Linktree, I was like, okay, I'm going to Link Pop, and now I'm on Link Pop.
yeah, I have no idea. They're all in it together, now. That's why Substack is very important, because at least right now they're letting me write whatever I want. So my presence is growing there. Please subscribe to there. There is a pay option, and lots of people are doing that, but you don't have to. I don't have a paywall. Everything's free. I'm a populist. Go to donaldjeffries.substack.com. That's where you can support me. Masking the Truth, my most controversial book yet. They are screwing with that. They're doing things, for instance, if you go to Apple Books, you want to go to Apple Books for whatever reason to buy it, you won't see the paperback. They're hiding the paperback everywhere. They'll have the ebook there listed for $999. They're screwing things around like that. Google Books banned from a search on Google Books. Amazon is taking down reviews. But Masking the Truth, How COVID-19 Destroyed Civil Liberties and Shut Down the World, Dr. Sherry Tenpenny put the forward. My most controversial book yet of all my controversial books. So please, you can support me by getting that, suggesting it to your library to break the library algorithm, because it's having a hard time getting library.
Well, I'll link all your links in the description, Don. It's been a pleasure chatting, and thanks everybody for listening to this episode of Out of the Blank Podcast.